one, it has to be a passion. You have to love it, because if you don't, it's going to beat you to death. Just because you have a black belt, people expect you to be someone that's going to kick ass and take names, and to be this hardcore fighter that you can beat up anyone that comes in your path just because you have a black belt.
I think just honoring that our path has taught us something different, and that we're all in different places, that it's really about continual growth, not destinationism.
You can learn all of the patterns, you can learn all of the form, get some of the applications, but not everyone is a fighter.
Welcome to the No Streetlights podcast. I'm Aaron.
And I'm Tim. We're veterans, here to talk about mental health, resilience, and the real struggles we face every day.
Our goal is to foster kindness through understanding. So, let's take a breath, relax, and be welcome.
Wait a minute. We have some really exciting news about our very first community outreach project as a nonprofit. We think you guys are going to want to be a part of this, so please stick around to hear more. Today's episode is a real honor for us, and honestly, it's one we've been looking forward to for a long time. We're joined by somebody who represents mastery, discipline, and the pursuit of excellence like few people we've ever met.
Today, I am honored to be introducing my Sifu, Jason Knapp, who's a 6th degree black belt in Shaolin Kung Fu. He's a lifelong martial artist. I think of him as the master of the mountain state, the Appalachian dragon, hillbilly Mr. Miyagi himself. So welcome to the show again.
Sounds like I should have some intro music and be walking down from like a backlit stage.
Yeah.
We can make it happen.
He's the king of games. Just fireworks going off everywhere. Whether you train in martial arts, you study the Tao, or you're just trying to get a little better each day, this conversation is going to be for you. Master Jason, welcome.
Thank you.
We're really glad to have you back here. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me. I enjoyed the last one, and I'm sure this will be a good one. I'll enjoy this one as well.
So most of our comments revolve around my mustache. I think this episode we're going to have a battle in the comments, whether you're team goatee or team mustache, because that goatee reminds me of somebody from Kill Bill. Who was that?
That was Pai Mei. Yeah.
With the Fu Manchu, or what was it called? Oh,
yeah.
God.
Well, I think that's the style of it, but yeah. But it was a lot longer and more flowing, I guess.
Well, his was wispy.
Real fine. This is kind of like a Brillo pad glued to the end of my chin. So
it suits what we're here for. It suits being the master of the mountain state. It does not need to be dainty and wispy.
Yeah, it represents the ruggedness that you've developed during your time in Appalachia. And you bring that ruggedness every day to the Quan, where you go and you teach all of your students a little bit of life lessons and philosophies, I think. I believe that's what goes on. I went once and kind of got beat up, and I was like, oh no, my little...
We get accused of doing things like that, and somewhere along the way we have a good time too. So
I think it's really awesome to get the opportunity to sit down with somebody who has spent, a lifetime studying and mastering their specific art here. And I did like a crash course video of, the history of Kung Fu. Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you, I retained like 0% of that information, but the video was really awesome. It's called What is Kung Fu? Art of One Dojo. Well, that's the name of the YouTube channel, Art of One Dojo. Okay. But, they go in depth into like the history of Kung Fu and talking about it and things of that nature. They get a little bit into the nomenclature. And one of the things that stood out to me so much was, I'm sure most people know this, but the history of, Chinese martial arts, Kung Fu, it's so expansive. It's so massive. You're talking about things that date back to over 2,000 years. Like, it's insane.
Yeah. There's so many different subsets of Chinese martial arts, different branches, different families. You have, like, I mean, even beyond like what we think of, like the traditional five animal styles, even you have like a certain family name, their kung fu, or a different family, their kung fu. I mean, it's just, it branched off, comes back together. So it's really hard to sit down and say, here's the exact point in time moment that this was started. And so much of it is oral history, oral tradition handed down, you know, from master to student, father to child, down through the generations. And it was only transmitted through physical teachings. Nothing, very little of it was written.
That's one thing that Shaolin has been teaching me here a lot lately is you can only learn so much contemplatively. You have to
Mm-hmm.
experience some knowledge in order to really grasp it. So,
Well, and that's what's so great about kung fu in general. Like with Pakwa, we have the posture names,
mhm.
and you learn the posture names with the movement. So you're engaging both halves of your brain, which helps you retain and to learn better, more efficiently. So they knew that back then, and all the forms have names. Each movement has a name that goes along with it and tells a story of sorts. Some of them don't. It's just, here's the name of this posture, here's the name of this, and so on down till you get to the end of it. But because you're learning that name with the and doing the physical movement associated with it, you retain it better. It 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 makes more sense, and a lot of it too. The name is a hint to what the application is of the technique. So I mean, it's just, if you want to go down a rabbit hole, you can take the plunge.
Yes. And I really hope that the people watching this right now comment what they want us to follow up with you about, because there's no way we can get through everything in
Oh,
this episode or our past two episodes.
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I do kind of want to get into it because I've been working through these problems in my head since I came back. Something I've realized is how important it is to drill the basics. Because
Mm-hmm.
when I watch you do a sidekick or a horse stance, your entire being becomes a sidekick or a horse stance. And that's something that I'm trying to teach myself and our students, is getting them closer to everything being a sidekick,
Mm-hmm.
everything being a horse stance. So when it comes to the importance of drilling basics over and over and over, why do you think that the fundamentals are so important?
So just the old analogy of the foundation of a house. In the very beginning, your fundamentals, your basic kicks, the body's movement to get into those positions efficiently and with power, strength, balance, all of that. You have to have a solid foundation. And if you continue to try and build a house on a weak foundation, it's going to crumble. It's not going to last. It's going to fall. If you're not taking the time and really practicing the basics, like front kicks, side kicks, just the movements themselves, everything else that you do is going to suffer as well.
Mm,
I mean, there comes a point in time where you've practiced a side kick 1,000 times, or more over the course of your martial career,
mhm,
but still, there's always that room to improve. There's always that, I can chamber my knee before the kick more efficiently. I can position my hips better to take advantage of the natural power that I develop moving into this position. The economy of it. There's always something to work on with just your basics. And it's something that my instructor, Master Jamie Mooney, something that he had always said. Really, the first 10 techniques that you learn at white belt's really the only thing anyone ever needs to defend themselves with. Everything else is just icing on the cake.
Yeah. We've said
And,
many
and those
times.
first 10 techniques are basics, just bare bones basic. You're doing a front kick, you're doing a side kick, here's an underhand punch, here's a knife hand attack, you're doing a back sweep to someone's legs, or you can turn it into a hip throw if you step deeper rather than just shallow and attacking the bottom of the leg, so working just those basic techniques will help build on everything else.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things that you had said to me at one time was, how do I make the sidekick my entire being? I had the good fortune to have Master Jamie as my instructor, and then Elder Master Gary Mullins. I was able. He came from Johnson City, Tennessee, from his school, and visited our school a lot, and listening to him and watching him, just the economy of motion that he had really inspired me a lot. And I spent a lot of time just watching movement as I was learning, as they were teaching me the forms or routines, rather than focusing solely on here's the gross movement of it. I was, how does this hand start in this position and end in the other position? How does it move through space to get there? And I really got focused on that.
Going back to this concept of mastering the basics, right? You've even mentioned how like elite groups like the Navy SEALs, they emphasize perfecting the basics.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think so many people try to skip past the fundamentals in this day and age?
Because it's boring. I'm not going to lie. I mean,
short, sweet, to the point.
Yeah. So, do you like doing push-ups? No. But push-ups are a good whole body exercise if done correctly, and you take the gym with you anywhere you go. But I can't remember the last time I heard anyone get excited. Oh, I can't wait to do 50 push-ups. No one ever says that. So it's, the forms, the kata, whatever you want to name it, in any martial art are far more interesting to learn and to practice than to just stand there and throw 50 front kicks with your right leg and turn around and throw 50 front kicks with your left leg. It's difficult to make yourself do something that is so repetitive and force yourself to not just throw the first 10 kicks good and the next 40 trash, to focus on trying to make every single one of the 50 as perfect as you can make them.
So Dr. Seth asked me in my recent interview with him several questions. Please go listen to that interview. But one of the key points that I tried expressing was that, the definition of Kung Fu is mastery through time and great effort. Yeah. So whenever you're explaining that to somebody, I tend to walk over and wipe my sweaty face and I say, this is the definition of Kung Fu. I don't know. I'm going through so many thoughts right now of the slow is smooth, smooth is fast. And another shooter centric piece of advice that we teach is if you aim for the shirt and miss, you're going to miss the person completely. Whereas if you aim for the shirt button and you miss, you're still going to hit the shirt.
Right.
So since we're on the topic of
aim small, miss small.
Yeah. Since we're on the topic of Navy SEALs and cool shooter sayings, could you take just a second to explain the whole purpose behind that whole aim for the shirt button so you'll hit the shirt?
So, if you're looking at a target and let's say the average torso, or so even someone's face. I like to use the torso just because the head is such a movable object anyway. We're talking maybe about 14 inches. And if that's your target, a 14-inch diameter, and that's all you're trying to hit, then you could end up anywhere in that diameter or in that 14-inch square. rather than right pinpoint in the solar plexus or in the center of the sternum or down into the liver area. So you pick, you find a small area. I like to focus on something the size of a screw head. That's what I like to think of. But just because, well, just because at the Quan, our wood trim still has some holes where the screws went into the wall, and that's just what I always associated with it. That's my target. That's the diameter of what I'm trying to hit. And when it's small like that, there's a lot less room that you're going to deviate from. Where if it's a large area, you have a large area of deviation. If it's a small target, a lot less.
Yeah, it harkens back to that old saying where if you aim for the moon, if you fail, you still land among the stars, which is wildly incorrect, but that's not the point.
Mm-hmm. And I think that also you can apply that to everything, setting goals. I mean,
100%.
if you're well, so we talk about this all the time. If your goal when you start is to get a black belt, no matter what the martial art is, and you get that black belt, that's the only goal you ever work towards, then what? Everyone gets that, attains that rank, and then if that was their only goal, they've got it now, and they're left with, well, now what do I do? Taking such a broad idea and making it your goal, like, I want to lose weight. Well, okay, how much weight do you want to lose? Over what period do you want to lose it? How are you going to do it? You need to set finite goals.
Yeah, that's a huge thing I wrote down while you were making your last point was SMART goals.
Mm-hmm.
You have to know exactly what you want to achieve, and you have to have a roadmap for how you get there. And I know this script is mostly for you, Tim, but I do feel a little bad going off it. A realization I've been working through lately is, and this is from Kung Fu, so thank you. The way you do anything is the way you do everything. The reason I am who I am is because I talk through people, because they need to hear me. I do a horse dance as hard as I can because I want to have a hard horse dance. And that
Mm-hmm.
carries over to this business. I told you I had a commanding officer who had a one redeeming thing, and that was the saying of Hogas, high octane, give a shit. He was a narcissist, a bad leader, horrible command climate. But I realized that the whole Terry Crews story mattered. His life was going downhill, and he said, you know what? I'm going to do everything like I'm getting paid $1 million to do it. And his life took off from there. So with this show, we do it like there are millions of people listening, so that when there are millions of people listening, we're ready.
Right.
You've been studying Shaolin for 30 years now?
Yeah.
Honing your craft and teaching it to others. So, in your eyes and in your experience, what makes a master?
For me, just didn't give up. I mean, being either too stubborn or too stupid to quit, whichever you want to call it.
That is a correct answer.
Well, it's so there was always that there's that motivational saying that popped up, I don't know how long ago, that the only difference between a white belt and a black belt is the black belt never quit.
Yep.
I guess in some small part that's true with the path to becoming a master or mastery in the martial arts, whether it's karate, judo, jiu-jitsu, whatever it may be. Is one, it has to be a passion. You have to love it, because if you don't, it's going to beat you to death.
Can I highlight that for just a second? If you don't care about what you're doing, do something else.
Yes, because you'll make yourself miserable trying to attain something that you don't really want.
And that's, again, all aspects of life. Jesus.
Right.
Yeah, 100%.
But one thing about the martial arts that I like in this regard is not everyone's going to come and get a black belt. Not everyone's going to go that course because that's not what everyone needs from it. Some people may just need a sense of belonging in their life for a while, and they'll come and stay for a little bit and they'll get what they need and then they move on. They find something else that's more to their calling. Or someone has low self-esteem, or their confidence is beat to hell, or whatever it is, and they come in and they get that, and then either they find that this is a passion, or this is starting to become a passion of theirs. They really like what martial arts is doing for them, or it gives them the confidence and the self awareness and esteem to say, I'm going to go try something else. This isn't exactly what I want. It's close, but now I can do this, so I can do something else. And it's just everyone has a different path.
I love the way that you talk about martial arts whenever you're saying that it gives everybody something different, right? And you don't say that with like a sense of like, just kind of discarding the individual, like what you were saying, right? Like if somebody shows up and they do some they do kung fu for a little bit, maybe they rank up once or twice and they realize like, hey, this gave me what I needed. It's not exactly the path I want to take, and they move on to something else. You don't say that with a sense of like, disgruntled or
There's no condescension
dislike of the individual, because you fully accept the fact that that's what martial arts is there for.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, kung fu is not going to be everybody's cup of tea.
No, and they may even find that moving, they may go to a different martial art. They start with kung fu, but they find out, I'm not so sure about this. I'm going to try something else, and they really get into jujitsu, or they get into kickboxing, or they go to
Salat,
Muay Thai, or what's that?
Salat.
Yeah.
What's up? What's up,
BJJ?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I mean, you may start in one discipline and end up in another. No, I don't look at the individual with any derision. I mean, that's everyone comes and goes for a reason.
I think that it's incredibly important. There's two things I want to highlight here. One, not everyone's black belt is the same, and that's why we put our names on our black belts. Because my black belt is different from Stephanie's, is different from Andrew's, is different from Matt's. I think just honoring that our path has taught us something different and that we're all in different places is incredibly important. That it's really about continual growth, not destinationism.
One of the things with the martial culture that I've really, I guess I don't like is just because you have a black belt, people expect you to be someone that's going to kick ass and take names, and to be this hardcore fighter that you can beat up anyone that comes in your path just because you have a black belt.
You're Bruce Lee and Jackie Chan. Yeah.
And that's not what it is. I mean, to me, that's not what it is.
Yeah.
You can learn all of the patterns. You can learn all of the forms. Get some of the applications, but not everyone is a fighter. Not everyone is going to be, Chuck Norris or Hoist Gracie or BJ Penn or that I'm going to date myself with these names.
Donnie Yen.
So even though that they have learned all that they needed and they can perform it as they should, that doesn't necessarily make them a fighter. I think there's more to getting a black belt than just being able to fight. It's what you learn along the way, how you have grown, what you've grown into, that black belt represents. And people are going to bag on me for this, but I really don't like the MMA culture, because And I'm not saying the fighters or anything like that, but in the beginning, most people that have that in mind, it seems to breed this thugism culture where I've always got to be the alpha male, and I've got to push myself out there, and I have to be aggressive all the time, and no one's going to stand up to me. I'm going to make everyone back down, and that's what it's all about. And it's you're a fighter. In my the way I look at it, it's different. It's not a martial artist anymore. You're a fighter.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the martial arts, being a martial artist, there's a you should be learning something about life, about yourself, about other people, about interactions and how you fit into the world rather than just pummeling the hell out of someone for 3 5-minute rounds.
So I'm going to tell you something, Jason, and it's okay if you judge me. I understand, but I really want to highlight this before I tell my dumb little story here. But what you're speaking about is wisdom, right? Like they get into martial arts maybe with this naive mindset of like, I'm here to learn how to kick somebody's ass. And then after years of working through it, they walk away and say, I mean, not necessarily walk away, but they walk out saying, you know, I never learned how to kick somebody's ass, but I learned a lot about myself.
Yeah, it was
Right.
never about that.
My mindset, I remember when Aaron had first gotten into Kung Fu and he was like super hardcore about it. I went through a phase where I was like, okay, but like, you know, what if a black belt in Kung Fu met a black belt in karate? Who would win the fight? You know, and there's a lot of like naivete that goes into that kind of mindset. And that's kind of what goes into the MMA culture as well. Cause I remember thinking at one point, like, well, how come, you know, if Kung Fu is so amazing, why don't all MMA fighters just get a black belt in Kung Fu and kick everybody else's ass? And it's not about that, you know, like I was lacking the wisdom, the lived experience to understand that that's not how things work, right? It's not so black and white and set in stone. A black belt in Kung Fu doesn't mean you're just going to whoop somebody's ass 25-8, right? A black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu doesn't mean that you're incredibly great at grappling. You've gone through experience. You've learned a lot of things. You've discovered stuff about yourself. You've discovered stuff a lot about, you know, forms and how your body moves and how things interact around you and how you interact with those things. You've become a master in a field that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be going out and Chuck Norrising everybody and, you know, you're going to be an internet meme for a couple of years. It just doesn't happen that way.
Right.
Don't get me wrong. Like, I'm sure your black belts, like even the ones that aren't necessarily quote unquote fighters, would deliver a hell of a kick to my face if I said something really stupid. The people who aren't fighters are probably very, very strong in a lot of different ways, but there's a lot of wisdom that you're speaking about in your statement there, because, and some people just don't have that level of wisdom yet.
I have tried to not make or tried to make sure that the school is not about that. Yes, that's always been my goal.
Yeah.
Is it? I want you to discover something about yourself along the way. I mean, people come in because they want to exercise, and they don't like going to the gym. They don't like sitting on a stationary bike or on a treadmill, and they think, well, this, you know, you hear it's a great exercise, I'll try this, you know, and that's all they're there for. We've got people that I just want to be somewhere. I want to be a part of something. And they come in and they like the atmosphere, and so they're a part of us. You know, they're a part of the school. You know, it's always the hardest thing, I think, is trying to steer someone to learning about themselves, how to get them to see that the trials and tribulations that they're going through trying to learn the martial art that I'm teaching them, the forms I'm teaching, the body mechanics and everything like that, is also ultimately translatable to everything else they do.
we have so many sayings about practice. The way you practice, the way you perform, perfect practice makes perfect. And the way you practice is, again, I'm tying everything back to the way you do anything is the way you do everything.
Hmm.
So, what has mastery taught you insofar as your mindful practice versus just going through the motions?
If you want to, again, if you want to relate this to martial arts training, your mindful practice can be anything from body mechanics. If you're chambering correctly, winding the hips up correctly, making a correct fist, that you're mindful of every movement that goes into that, and you're consciously focusing on all parts of it from beginning to end. You can take that into breathing as you're moving through the forms. Am I breathing in the right places? Am I breathing correctly? How should I be breathing? Tai Chi is really, really good one for that, because you have the time to actually think about those things. Um, everyone, Tai Chi has been called meditation in motion, and it is. Um, they tell you to empty your mind and you know think of nothing, which is crazy. Every time I hear that, I mean, the human mind cannot do that. You can't think of nothing.
Yeah, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've thought of nothing multiple times, especially when in boot camp, just
Yeah.
like sitting there drooling.
But you can focus on one thing, and that you know okay, I'm going through Tai Chi, and I'm going to really focus on my posture, keeping my shoulders over my hips, moving my legs to not leaving any part of my body behind as I move, bringing everything with me as I go forward or retreat. Everything is moving in this within the six harmonies. And that's what you focus on. And maybe the next time in your practice, you're going to focus on your breathing. And there's your mindfulness, what you choose to focus on to the exclusion of everything else going on.
I've been watching our students very closely, and I think I've got a theory that I want you to help me with here, because I've asked you this question and gotten a few different answers, and we've still been trying to figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
So I think up to brown belt, you're trying to do the thing right.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think once you get to black belt, you're trying to do the right thing. And then I think you're a master when the thing you do is the right thing to have done. So am I hitting the mark here? Am I off? Because I know watching them practice, they're just trying to get their hand to the right place, trying to get their foot to the right place and not fall over. Whereas I'm thinking like, okay, what is this movement pattern teaching me? What animal is this from? What's my philosophy? I'm driving through the heel, not just trying to put my leg out there.
I think what you find is like what you said. The lower ranks to begin with. You, there's so much. It's like drinking through a fire hose in the beginning, because everything that you've never had to think about when you move your body, you're now having to think about is now being pointed out to you. And as you go along, so many of those things that you have focused on become second nature, muscle memory. You don't think about it anymore. You've practiced it so much, and if you focused on your practice correctly, then you've progressed. You've made that movement your own. So now this is something that you don't have to think about so much anymore. So now you can look at other aspects of it. And by the time you've spent 30 years, I guess,
Yeah.
as you're learning forms and learning new things, there's already so much. The human body can only move in so many ways. So now that once you realize that, you start looking at more of the nuances, the small details, fine motor skill that's involved in some things, because all the gross motor skill is the same as it ever was. the more experience you have, I think the easier it is to see what's coming. You can look at something and say, okay, I know when you're in this position, there's only so many ways that you can move in or out of it. So you're looking and anticipating what that movement's going to be a lot. Whereas the beginning, you're just like, what? I don't know. I don't even know where my hand goes. What am I doing? You know?
This or this? What am I doing here?
Yeah.
I think that's a key thing. Like, you've gone through the process of already understanding these lessons, right? Like, you're able to kind of package them up in a nice answer here for our questions. But truth be told, a lot of these lessons, right, are not going to be, it's hard to absorb them and then actually use them. Like, just because I've sat down and had 2 conversations with you now doesn't mean that when I go to kung fu, I'm all of a sudden going to be able to understand this stuff. It's practical and using that in the real world that's going to truly determine how well I can master those skills. But providing the fundamentals and being able to explain them, I think, feeds very much into why you are a master.
This is our first ever community fundraiser for No Streetlights Inc. We're raising funds to reinvigorate Master Jason's Shaolin Kung Fu School. Because the mats I'm training on today are the mats I got my black belt on more than 10 years ago. Those mats were old when I got there 20 years ago. So we need new mats. And Tim and I have taken it upon ourselves that we are going to replace the mats. We would really love to have your help. This place is a lot more than just learning techniques and shadow boxing. It's about learning yourself. And we want to offer scholarships so that students who need to learn all these things and find their confidence, they have that opportunity. And we would like to offer incentives for those amazing instructors that help the community. We think that you also want to make that happen.
We think this would be an amazing way for us to utilize our status as a nonprofit and start doing a community outreach. This isn't just about replacing mats. This is about providing a place in the Mid-Ohio Valley where students have a safe-ish place to learn about discipline, find confidence, and mentorship. You can help us make that happen by going to nostreetlights.org to donate for this amazing fundraiser if you want to get a part of it. Don't forget, we're going to be shouting out everybody who donates in the future episodes, and we're going to be updating you all along the way. I think a lot of the times whenever it comes to Kung Fu martial arts and things of that nature, I always relate it to my worldly experience as best as I can. And I've always thought of there's 2 things in this world that I know for a fact of will teach you a level of discipline: martial arts and the military. And I find that so fascinating that I took the military path, and Aaron's done both paths. Good for him.
Hello.
Good on you, Aaron. Good job. You deserve a cookie, buddy. Relating it to my experience, my time in the military, the discipline that I have learned, and the way I have been taught certain skills and how to incorporate them into decision making and things like that, it makes me think about how the discipline in martial arts works. So I'm kind of curious if you can share a moment when, like, the mindfulness and discipline that you've learned in martial arts has helped you navigate something outside of the gym, like a actual life challenge.
The biggest thing that I have taken from it is you can get through anything. You know, I was never a very athletic person. I was not athletically gifted. So everything that I have gone through to learn anything, it was a struggle. I always fought with it. The more intricate movements and difficult kicks or what have you, it was always me fighting to get there. And I think that I've learned not to give up. You know, if you want something bad enough, you'll find a way to make it happen. You'll work at it to get what you want, or you won't. And it's pretty much just as simple as that. One of the sayings on the wall to Quan: if it's important to you, you'll find a way. If not, you'll find an excuse.
Yes. Harken back to that episode 91 again. Aaron made sure to bring that up too. That's beautiful. I think that's very true too. And it doesn't have to be pinpointed down to one specific thing, but you're 100% right.
But and again, and also with that, it's learning to live with that with whatever choice you make, and not beating yourself up about it.
Yeah, there's a phrase in the military that I absolutely love, and it's if you're wrong, stay wrong.
Mm.
And I love it because it kind of goes in the idea of like just follow through, right? Like
Mhm.
even if you fucked up, pardon my language here, but even if you messed up, right? Follow through with it. If you're wrong, we'll address it later and we'll get it fixed, but don't, don't become indecisive in the middle of the moment. Make
Right.
sure you follow through, you finish off,
Take
and then
action.
yeah, take action, reevaluate later, right?
Mhm.
Reevaluate and learn. That's where the idea, that's the unsaid second half, right?
If at first you don't succeed, find out why.
Yes. Yeah, big facts.
And not only that, find out if you really want to.
Yeah.
I mean, no,
That's
seriously,
very fair.
if you think about it, I mean, is this what I really want? Am I struggling and striving and working towards something that I don't really want? And is it, because you're toiling towards a goal that is unimportant to you and really you're not passionate about, you're going to get in your own way and you're going to create your own roadblocks.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was something. I know you have a few questions, which we might get to later about my interview with Dr. Seth, but he kept asking about, like, what does Kung Fu teach? Why are people studying this? Why are people studying that? What's up with MMA versus Kung Fu? And I was like, Kung Fu is so hard because it's you versus you. All these other arts are like, how many people can you beat up? Who can you be better than? Whereas Kung
Mhm.
Fu, it's you versus you. We're doing kata, and you're doing that jank by yourself. So can you be better than you were? So it's very hard for someone to hold that mirror up to themselves and look at themselves.
And I don't want it to sound like I'm bagging on MMA, because those guys are accomplished fighters. They really are, and they deserve all the recognition that they're given. They deserve everything they get because they have sacrificed a great deal to be where they are. Personally, physically, it takes a lot to train yourself up to be able to step into that ring and do that. If it doesn't work in the cage, then that means it's no good. Well, that's not true. you know, if there's a reason why a particular art isn't faring well, let's take a look at why that is. You know, is it the practitioner? Which most of the time it is. A lot of traditional martial arts styles, unfortunately, especially the striking arts, where you're just not able to practice as it was intended hundreds of years ago. They fought each other. They learned their techniques or parts of the form and then the application of it, and then they drilled it against their fellow students, and with contusions and bruises and broken bones and everything else that went along with that. In this day and age, people have to have day jobs, and you can't show up at work looking like Fight Club. You know, as strikers, we are at a little bit of a disadvantage when it comes to training. So you've got to find other alternatives. Spend time with a heavy bag. Find a partner that you can walk through things with at 15%, 25% speed and power, and work your way up, to where you're almost at, you know, full throttle.
Yeah. There's an old saying that I'd love for you to remind me of before I get to my next big question. It was, it feels like it's around Ip Man, where you're like, master the opponent, win 50 fights out of 100.
No other and self out of 100 battles, 50 wins. No self and others. No self and other, 100 battles, 100 wins. So, you can either, if you study and you know yourself really well, but you neglect learning your opponent, whatever your opponent or adversary may be, you're only going to get half the results that you wish out of whatever that may be. But if you spend the time to learn yourself and also learn your opponent or whatever roadblock is in your way, then you have a better chance of succeeding every time you engage.
So the big question that I've been trying to figure out, and I'm not equipped for because I'm not a master yet. I want to know what you're working on. And I don't mean the form, I don't mean the kata. I'm talking about the thought patterns. I know when I'm doing stuff, I'm thinking about economy of motion. I'm thinking about power generation. Where am I grounding? Um, so are you thinking about, chi and pressure points or balance point?
The pressure points or acupuncture points I'm always thinking about, just because those are your aim small, miss small targets. And it gives you an idea of where the attack is supposed to go, what plane it's on, given what your body position is relative to where you're striking. Um, but most of what I really look at now, um, being 54 years old, um, is body mechanics. How to move efficiently without putting anything on a bind. Yeah, it's not kind on the knees. Getting in and out of some of the stances is a little more difficult now than what it used to be. So I look at more efficient ways to do that, and if I can't do it, I find an adaptive means. How could I change this to fit my needs, to do what I need to do with it. So that's my biggest focus and what I really look at right now, because our Grandmaster Sin's 82, and he moves better than I do sometimes, most of the time. So I'm kind of thinking that I'd like to still be able to do some of this at 82 years old. So I need to find a different way. The young man's way is to power through everything.
Yeah.
Aaron.
Well, not anymore.
Not a young man anymore. So I have to find a different way. And so that's really what I look at for the most part now.
While I have you here, Master Jason, I would like to ask a question. So this is going to be framed. I'll just ask it as it is, right?
Okay.
So for any of our listeners who are early on in their journey, whether it's fitness, martial arts, or personal growth, what advice would you give to me about sticking to it when progress feels slow? Because sometimes when we're working on this podcast, I'm not feeling the amount of energy we're putting in versus like what we're getting in return sometimes doesn't feel fair, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, proportionate. And I have a hard time struggling with that. And that's just me with this podcast, but there's plenty of other people who have faced, they've looked down the Shawshank Mile and said, that's way too fucking far. That's going to be difficult for me to do. So what kind of advice do you have?
Well, really, it would be to one, step back and ask yourself, is this what I want? Am I getting what I need from this? Is this feeding me? And if the answer to that question is yes, then do it. Put your whole self into it. Don't leave anything out. Yeah, it's hard. The road's tough. It sucks, but if it's important to you, if you feel like it's worth it, then do it. Throw all of yourself into it. Don't do anything half-assed.
Never do half-assed, always whole-assed.
Whole-assed.
I told my wife once we got married, there's no half ash in here. You're a whole ash now. So
beautiful.
My Sifu,
Nice.
Master Jason Knapp, the hillbilly Mr. Miyagi, Appalachian Dragon, whatever you want to call him. Thank you for teaching me that mastery isn't about your belt or your title. It's about continual evolution.
Progress, not perfection.
If any of our listeners here today, if you're chasing any kind of mastery, whether it's fitness, arts, healing, or you're just wanting to be a better person, I really hope that Jason's words remind you it's the basics, the mindset, and the patience that build greatness.
any progress is a win. Doesn't matter how you measure it, how big of a bite that it is or how small it might be. I mean, progress is progress.
Stick with the journey.
Take it as a win.
You got to stay present. You got to trust the process. If you keep going left foot, right foot, you'll make it there.
Master Jason, how do you eat an elephant?
One bite at a time.
One bite at a time, baby. Woo!
With a fork?
With a fork?
If you're a coward.
A spoon. Yeah. Yeah, if you're a coward. Chopsticks?
So, again, I've said this numerous times in person. I'd like to say it here on the air. I am truly honored and humbled to call you my Sifu. So,
well,
thank you for joining us again. I can't wait until our next conversation. What is today? Sunday? I'll see you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.
Thanks again, gentlemen. I appreciate it. I always enjoy.
So how do people get a hold of you, Jason? Where can they go to get their butt kicked?
You can come down to 71 Rosemar Road in Parkersburg, West Virginia, or look us up at ShaolinMatc.com.
Beginner classes are Monday and Wednesday from 6 to 8. You can show up just before 6 or just before 7 to make the bow in. Sparring is Saturday along with conditioning. You can show up at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock. Show up whenever. I'll fight you.
Yeah, if you've ever wanted to fight Aaron, now's your opportunity. And a huge thank you to all of our listeners for joining us on this journey. Whatever teaching Jason brought to you today, something that you walked away from this episode with, leave it down in the comments. Let us know what bit of wisdom really stuck with you. We want to hear it because, hey, I'm learning just like you guys. Aaron's learning just like all of you. Master Jason, I know you're in a constant state of learning because you are a master. So whether you're learning on this show with us or you're learning out there in the real world, just wanted to say thank all of you. Thank you so much for joining us.
If you got something out of this episode, feel free to like, comment, share. Those are the free things you can do. Or you could support us fiscally over on Patreon. Our top supporters over there are Nick, Horton, Eric, Spears, Jason. No, not that one. Jason Grooms. And at the first shout out tier, Tim, who do we have?
We have the top giver of all time. That is our very dear and close friend whom I can't wait to go ghost hunting with here shortly, Ketria Hausner. And then, of course, the man, the myth, the musician himself, Highland Markle. Thank you so much for everything you've helped us with on this show, brother. Thank you so much for our intro music, which I'm so glad we have back on the air, and I hope all of our fans are glad to hear it as well.
He's dropping new music, so keep your eyes peeled. Final little reminder, our podcast cannot be substituted for professional medical advice. If you do need help now, please call 911, or you can text or call 988 for immediate intervention. If you want protracted support, you can go over to BetterHelp, use our link, betterhelp.com/NSLP. Gets you 10% off your first month and helps the channel grow quite a bit. You deserve to heal. This lets you heal on your terms.
As I like to always say, let people know, be good to yourselves and each other.
We love you.
Wait, one last reminder real quick at the very end. Our Kung Fu fundraiser is going on right now over at nostreetlights.org. We've got two goals. We're going to replace the mats, and we're going to provide scholarships to the students who are in need. You can donate, read updates, and share the cause over at nostreetlights.org. Every little bit helps, and every donor will be thanked in an upcoming episode. Let's light the way for these kids and their teachers. Peace!
No street lights, but we're finding a way. In the dark, but we got something to say.